In early 2019, the British Army caused quite a lot of offence, particularly among overly sensitive people, when they launched a recruitment campaign. They also attracted massive global media coverage for its rather bold and challenging messages. It was inspired by the First World War poster campaign featuring Field Marshal Horatio Herbert Kitchener with the slogan, "Your country needs you." The 2019 ads were aimed at attracting snowflakes and self-absorbed millennials. In case you're not familiar with the term, a snowflake is yet another derogatory term for millennials, those who melt at the first sign of pressure and are too easily offended by anything politically incorrect or everything that makes them feel bad about themselves. In other words, snowflakes have little or no mental toughness or resilience. But join the army and they'll give you some. So regardless of your age, are you a bit of a snowflake at the moment? Just suppose you were arrested one day on a charge of being a snowflake and had to go to court to defend yourself. Would there be enough evidence from your family, your friends and your colleagues to secure a conviction perhaps? Or how might you be able to prove categorically that you aren't a snowflake? Being a stronger person requires mental toughness, and in this video we'll explore the subject of how anyone can develop mental toughness, which in my opinion is the foundation for being more resilient. And I'll go into a lot more detail about how to be more resilient in a future video. Now, you can't be resilient unless you have a degree of mental toughness, which is a learnable skill. And it starts with the decision to work towards being mentally tougher. I talked in an earlier video about the importance of developing a growth mindset, believing that you're capable of doing, achieving, and being more. Those with a growth mindset tend to experiment more and are a bit more adventurous and discover that things don't always turn out brilliantly. But with a growth mindset, you could find yourself being challenged sometimes, even failing occasionally. So long as you stick with a growth mindset, the more that happens, the more you'll learn to take it in your stride, to not be crushed by temporary setbacks. And most setbacks are actually temporary. So here's another question. How easily and how quickly do you give up on things by telling yourself that what you're doing is too tough? You manage to convince yourself, perhaps in a split second, that you can't do something any longer because you don't have the skill or the physical strength, or it's too cold or it's too hot, whatever it might be. So you stop. You simply accept defeat again. Perhaps because that's what you've done so often in the past. Now, let me illustrate by telling you about an old friend of mine. She grew up on a small farm in Gloucestershire, which is a beautiful part of England. There wasn't much money, but she had a great childhood. In her teenage years, it was expected that she, her sister, and her brother would all help out on the farm. Sometimes the work was physically challenging. She told me of the many times when she'd come home from school, do her homework, have some tea, then during the evening the whole family would work in the fields until it got too dark to work. Haymaking was the hardest. If you've ever lifted bales of hay, you'll know just how heavy and awkward they are. They need to be lifted high up when they're being stacked and then later lifted onto the back of a trailer. For a teenage girl, it was grueling work. Now, this is what she told me. The pain was intense, but you learn to work through it. And that's the phrase she used. You work through it. She said you simply ignore the pain because it's irrelevant. There's a job that needs to be done. And if you continue to cave in or give up too quickly, you'll never develop the necessary mental toughness to stretch yourself. Now, let's just be clear here. We're only talking about activity pain, not injury pain. If you ever injure yourself, don't work through it. Stop. You could cause long-term damage to yourself. But think more about the work through it idea. It can be applied to every challenging situation. She and her siblings developed toughness, both physically and mentally. And they prove it can be learned. And you are probably capable of far more than your brain currently thinks that you are. Unless, of course, you've already learned these lessons, and you'll know what I'm saying is true. Because it's the mindset, not the muscle, that builds toughness. The muscles simply get used to it. Heavy lifting isn't just about lifting physical weights, though. It can be applied to just about every challenging situation, or to activities and responsibilities that right now may be outside what you think that you're actually capable of. Anyone who lifts weights, though, knows that if you set out to do, say, 10 heavy lifts, by the time you've reached 5, a lot of people are ready to stop. Their mind tells them they can't do any more. And a lot of people will listen to that voice and stop instantly. But others will tell their brain, not necessarily out loud, let me do one more. And guess what? They do. Then they say, one more. And they do. And one more. And they do. Until they reach number 10 and manage to do that too. That's double what their mind thought it was capable of. Mental toughness is often as simple as refusing to accept as fact anything your brain tells you. When it comes to physical exercise, is your body capable of far more than your brain is currently prepared to allow? Does it try to convince you to stop too soon? It might believe it's protecting you, but is your current mindset actually what's keeping you weak? Maybe it is. Each time you allow that to happen, your mind robs you of recognizing your true potential. So, how mentally tough are you? I mean, really, what are your real limits? And how often have you tested it to the limit? You might get a shock because you're capable of far more than you believe. Athletes measure their performance by their PBs, their personal bests. They've targets and goals that stretch and challenge them physically. And for endurance athletes, a huge part of their training is mental conditioning, teaching the mind and body to work through the pain together and just get on with the task. More reps, more yards, or more miles. And mental toughness training doesn't apply just to physical exercise. Think of any other activities that you're involved in, perhaps at work. How often do you procrastinate by finding excuses not to start a challenging task? I mean, just getting started is the biggest challenge for a lot of people. Instead, they do easy tasks first. I mean, it sort of fools them into believing that they're being busy. But busyness is not the same as being effective. A lot of people listen to that inner voice that says, oh, why not make yourself a drink? Go and check your phone. It's a very common example of people who lack mental toughness and self-discipline. In many cases, it's not because they're lazy or bad. It's just that it may never have occurred to them that they self-sabotage so much. Anyway, in summary, mental toughness is a learnable skill. It can take time and daily practice, pushing yourself to keep going just a little bit longer than you may have done before. And each time you experience success, you build up actual proof of what you're capable of. And the more you can deal with, the more you'll be able to handle in the future.